Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Vinyl Den, your channel for record collecting by record collectors. I'm Nick. Today, I'm talking about vinyl record collecting myths. There's a bunch of links down below. Make sure you check them out. There's links for the Vinyl Den Facebook group, for the merch page, for the Spotify and Apple Music playlist that I put together every week, and the Patreon page. Make sure you go check all that out. Of course, if you enjoy the episode, make sure you give me a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button down below. Make sure you hit that notification bell so you're notified every time I release new episodes. So this is actually a conversation that came from the Vinyl Den Facebook group. It was a while back. It was probably at least 6 or 7 months ago. We were talking about myths around vinyl records, vinyl record collecting, and there were some really interesting ones I never really thought of before until they were brought up. And I kind of want to have a bigger conversation about some of them today, because I see them all over the place, whether it's on social media or blog posts or on YouTube. A lot of these myths really kind of creep up, almost every single day I see them. But the first big one is you have to have an expensive setup to enjoy records. And it's just not true. You can spend literally thousands of dollars on turntables and receivers and speakers, but for a vast majority of people, you're not going to get a really good return on your investment doing that. For a vast majority of people, I think if you spend a couple $100, get a good entry-level turntable with whether it's a Audio-Technica LP60 or 120 or a U-Turn Orbit or even like a Fluence. I think the RT82 is one that's upgradable. Those are really good like entry-level turntables to get you into listening to records, and you're going to have a really good experience with them. I will say that two big things with record players or turntables that make a big difference. There's two things. There are your stylus and then your speakers. I think they're the two big components that maybe you want to spend a little bit more money on and eventually upgrade. You don't need to do that right away. Just as long as you have like a basic stylus, like a Audio-Technica 3600L. I think it's like a basic stylus. It comes on a lot of entry-level turntables. You're going to get good, consistent sound out of. But eventually you want to upgrade that. So make sure you're getting a turntable, that is upgradable. I know the Audio-Technica LP60 is not upgradable. I think the 120 is. The Fluence RT82 is upgradable also. You can adjust the tone arm on it. So you can go from a basic standard stylus, upgrade that to like a Ortofon Rad or Ortofon Blue eventually down the line. And then the other component that's going to make a difference, of course, are your speakers. So, yes, you might want to eventually think about upgrading those bookshelf speakers and get some nice floor stand-up speakers that are going to have a little bit better of a room-filling sound. But like I said, those are the two components that you really want to pay attention to. Everything else, I think, is kind of fluff and really not necessary to build a really engaging listening experience. Another myth that's out there that I see almost every single day, and it might make some people mad when I talk about it, is that vinyl records sound better than CDs. It's just not true. I think the better way to say it is that records sound different than CDs, because that's really true. If you take 100 people and put them in a room, none of them are going to have the same opinion about whatever you play. And I think that's the beautiful thing about music, is how subjective it really is. None of us have the same opinions and likes and tastes. And it really kind of comes through in this whole debate of CDs versus records. Of course, I come down on the side that I enjoy vinyl records more than I enjoy CDs. But there's a lot of people out there that have the complete opposite. And I think a lot of that comes down to how it's mastered and your setup and things like that. There's a lot of variables when it comes to records that maybe don't really exist with CDs. But like I said, I think to say that one sounds better than the other, I think it's just not true. And it primarily just comes down, like I said, to personal preference and what you grew up listening to. I think plays a factor in it, and the style of music and how it's sourced. There's so many different, like I said, there's so many different variables that go into listening to music that just to say one is better than the other is just you just can't prove that. Another one that I guess kind of goes along with the whole vinyl versus CD argument is that records are pointless if they're pressed from a digital source. I see this quite a bit, especially with the whole mobile fidelity big flare-up a year or two back. There was lawsuits and everything else over them using a digital step in their process. And I get it. The people absolutely felt misled, and there's definitely some bad marketing, I think, with that. But what that really showed was, at least the products that they released, showed that you could take a digital source, if it's mastered well, it can sound great. Because that's the one thing that everyone said. No one made the argument that those mobile fidelity releases sounded horrible. A lot of people said that there were some of the best sounding versions of those albums. And that's why I said, if you regardless of the source, whether it's digital or analog, it really comes down to how it's mastered, if it's going to sound well or not. Now, I do have some records that were absolutely pressed from CD, something that someone just like ripped off their computer and then pressed, and they sound horrible. So you can have a horrible sounding album from a digital source. I have some horrible sounding albums from analog sources also. And that's why I said it really comes down to how it's mastered, not really the source that it comes from. Something I used to see creep up every once in a while, I really haven't seen it talked about in a while now, is thicker records and whether or not they sound better and are going to last longer than, say, 120 or 140 gram records that were pressed, decades ago. And from what I've seen, I don't see any difference between records I'm buying now and older pressings that I've got. I've got pressings that are, 50 plus years old that have been played literally hundreds of times and sound absolutely incredible, sound just as good as records that are coming out now. That's why I think a lot of that thicker records, whether it's 160 or 180 gram, you're even seeing 200 gram records come out over the last couple of years. I think a lot of that is just a marketing ploy. It just gives justification to charge more for records that that can be pressed on thinner records and are going to sound just as great as anything that's coming out now. One that I used to 100% buy into, and in my opinion has really changed over the last couple of years, is that picture discs sound like garbage. When I was growing up in the 80s, it was very much the case. If you saw a picture disc, you knew not to play it. It looks cool. It'd be cool to have, but you knew you weren't going to put it on your turntable and listen to it because you knew it was going to sound bad. And I think that's kind of stayed true up until at least the last couple of years. And over the last several years, I bought a couple of picture discs that do sound horrible. But I've also started picking up more that have a great sound quality to them, sound just as great as standard pressings. I think the last one I got was for Record Store Day earlier this year. I picked up a copy of Show by The Cure. It sounds incredible. It's a great live album. I've been wanting it on vinyl for a long time. Picture disc was the only way it was available. I did pick up the standard release when it came out a few months later. I did an A-B comparison on them, and there really wasn't a sound quality difference between the two. So much so that I did end up keeping the standard pressing and sold off my picture disc. But it's another example to me that, picture discs have really changed over the last couple of years. And I think the issue that kind of remains with them is there's still an inconsistency when it comes to picture discs, because I still see some that get really bad reviews, but other ones that, just sound great in comparison to a standard release. Another one that I used to really buy into up until I'd say the last few years, the more I thought about it, the more my opinion has changed on it, is that record wear will eventually ruin the sound quality of your records. Like I said previously, I've got copies of The Dark Side of the Moon. I got original pressings of it that are 50 years old, have been listened to literally hundreds of times over the years, and still sound incredible. And that's just showing that if records are taken care of and handled properly and stored properly, you aren't going to have this big sound degradation that we've talked about over and over again for decades now when it comes to vinyl records. And I'm not saying that there can't be a degradation in sound the more you play a record. I know that's possible. But I think a vast majority of people aren't going to be able to tell a difference on their systems. If you're one of those people that have spent $5,000 on your turntable and your speakers and all that, yeah, if you've got this big, huge setup, you might be able to tell a difference. But for a vast majority of people, you're going to play your records and enjoy them and love them for years and years and years, and they're going to sound just as great now as when you bought them, 30 plus years ago. But it's really important to look at records as an investment. You're spending a lot of money buying these records. You got to take care of them. You got to clean them. You got to sleeve them. You got to properly take care of them, handle them correctly, because they're not the most, that's the other thing I'll kind of add in there, that a lot of people talk about how fragile records are. And yes, when you're shipping them through the mail, they're absolutely fragile. But once you get them in your house, you got them in your hands, if you take care of them, they're not. They're pretty flexible. You can do a lot. You can move them around, handle them. Just handle them with care. Don't drop them or throw them or anything like that. But for the most part, you're not going to hurt your records by handling them and listening to them. Well, that's all I got for you today, guys. Thanks for checking the show out. Well, I guess I'll leave it this way: is if you're, regardless of the setup you have or how much money you've invested in your record collection, just buy what you want, buy what you're going to enjoy, take care of the records. It'll last you a really long time. You'll get a ton of enjoyment out of it. And that's really all that matters. But I don't know, drop me a comment down below. Let me know what you guys think are some of the bigger record collecting myths out there, because there's a ton of them. I could have spent, a lot longer talking about more than just the 5 or 6 that I talked about today. But let me know what you guys think. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give me a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button down below. That's all I got. Until next time, keep on spinning. Peace.